Welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast with your hosts, best-selling children's author Amy Parker and author and co-creator of VeggieTales, Mike Naraki. If instilling biblical values in kids is important to you, this podcast will help give you the resources, wisdom, and hope to do just that. Now let's join our hosts, Amy and Mike, for this week's episode.
Welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast. I'm Mike Naraki.
And I'm Amy Parker, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with recording artist and author Ellie Holcomb. But before we dive into our talk with Ellie, let's start with a Bible verse. Mike?
Yeah, and today's verse is Psalm 143:5 from the English Standard Version. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all that you have done. I ponder the work of your hands.
Do you ever forget to remember what's true? Well, sometimes remembering is hard to do. That's how Ellie's new book, Don't Forget to Remember, starts, and we would love to hear more. Ellie, welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast.
Hi, guys. It's so good to be here with you.
And Ellie, we've met very briefly just once. A number of months ago, we both presented for Lipscomb University's convocation for the start of the school year.
Right.
Back in August, which now with everything going on feels like an eternity ago. So we just passed each other on stage. We didn't get a chance to talk then, but I'm so glad that we can now. And so this is your second book, but if I may, can we go back and talk about your first book for a second? Who sang the first song? Because that led to the album Sing Creation Songs, which led to a Dove Award rivalry between you and I, or I should say, Michael W. Smith, Tyler Smith, and I, for our Lullaby album. And so I work with your dad, Brown, at Lipscomb, and we had a little reverse pregame trash talking going on. I said, you're going to win for sure. And he said, no, you're going to win for sure. And guess what? Neither of us won.
We lost together.
Exactly.
I love it so
much.
The
Bethel music won, wah, wah, wah. But it was a great album. And we can't wait to hear more about the music that you have coming out along with your new book. So
awesome. Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. Well, good game. Air 5. We tried.
Yeah, we tried.
And I love reverse trash talk, too. I feel like we need a little more reverse trash talk in the world.
You're going to win.
You're going to win.
Hey, by the way, I do love that record that you guys made. I listened through the whole thing, and I just, not just once, but it just is, it's amazing. So well done, sir.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Win.
Well, it helps when you have Michael W. Smith singing,
He's pretty great, yeah.
That's awesome. So, Ellie, what inspired you to write your second book? It's a board book for young children. And how did you come up with the idea for Don't Forget to Remember?
Sure. So I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I had one very particularly forgetful brother. And so almost every way to school, we would be halfway to school, and he would pipe up from the back seat and say, Mom, I forgot to remember my backpack, or Mom, I forgot to remember my lunch, or Mom, I promise you, he said this one day, Mom, I forgot to remember my shoes.
This sounds exactly like my 18-year-old son.
We have actually had this happen before. We had to drive all the way back home and get the shoes, and then we were late for school. I don't know.
Guys,
I don't know how you forget shoes, but we did.
Somehow you do. He always managed, he never forgot his breakfast that morning. He would always have like a Pop-Tart in hand. Like that took the precedence, I think, over everything else.
Yeah.
So, but that became kind of a phrase in our family that we would repeat day in and day out, like, oh, I forgot to remember this. And so I just thought when it was time for me to write the second book, I've got 3 young kids. I've Emmylou, Huck, and Rivers, 7, 4, and 19 months. And our 19-month-old is a party. We call him a joy tornado. He loves toilets and choking hazards and climbing. So we are busy at home.
He's looking for a way to kill himself.
It is not literally. I'm like, oh Lord, we made it through another day. Thank you. I'll send y'all a picture later of him just standing in the toilet. But literally, he had his rain boots on. So there was
great.
There was poop in the toilet, but he did have his rain boots. So it's like
I was going to ask if he was fishing for trout out, but that's
It could be worse. At least he had boots on. We just wash those off in the tub. So anyway, it is a full-time job being a mom to 3 young kids. And so there's so many things that I am telling them throughout the day, like don't stand in the toilet, and also wash your hands before we eat, and say please and thank you, and we need to share, and we're going to go potty before we leave the house, although we're not leaving the house right now. And so but at the end of the day, sometimes I get through these busy days as a mom to young kids, and I'm like, have I told them anything that actually matters? And a lot of times my answer is like, nope. We're alive. I'm not sure that I've told them the things that I really want them to know about how God loves them, that whether they're up high or down low, whether they're glad or sad, like he is with them, and his mercy never runs out on them, and he made them on purpose for a purpose, and it's an adventure to follow him. And so I just thought, man, what if I could write a book that would be, because at the end of the day, even though they're crazy days, we always do a couple things. We always read books, and we sing, and we snuggle, and we pray. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, man, what if I could write a book that would be kind of like a campfire to gather around as a family, to huddle around as a family, to warm our hearts and our minds by the light of God's love. What are the things at the end of the day that I really want my kids to know? What if I could write those into a children's book? And so that is how Don't Forget to Remember was born.
Well, that's perfect. And it leads right into the next question that I have for you. How can parents use this book to spark conversations with their kids on God's creation and how and why he made us?
Sure. I love that question, because that's exactly what I hope this book will do, is be a conversation starter. So I base the book out of Psalm 19, which says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim his handiwork. And I just started thinking, I was trying to think of, because kids are so tangible, right? Like they're total literalist, realist. Like they see what they see, and they talk about it plainly. And so I just was thinking, how can I help my kids hold on to some of these truths that I want them to know? And when I was reading Psalm 19, I was like, oh my goodness, the earth, creation, they love being outside. And if creation is singing the song of God's glory, like, how does the chorus go? What do the verses say? Like, I want to turn, I hope that this book turns the volume up on creation's song. And so every single page is based on some beautiful thing in creation that's just outside that you can talk about any day, because you can look out your window and see the birds singing over you. What are the birds telling us about God? Well, they tell us that God sings songs over us, or that we don't have to worry about any day in our life, because look, they have food. Did they go to the grocery store? No, God's feeding them. He's taking care of them, and he's going to take care of us. So I hope that the book will kind of help parents and kids look for clues in creation, and that as they find those clues and discover those clues, it will be like following a map to the sweetest treasure that I've ever known, which is the treasure of God's love for us.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's just so gorgeous. And your first book, Who Sang the First Song, the illustrations are gorgeous there too. And so obviously you've worked with the same illustrator, Kayla Heron, again. How was the process this time around as a second-time author? Did you feel like you knew some stuff going in, or was it
I knew how talented she was. Yeah, it was. I was like, oh, I can ask for a lot because you are gifted. And so it's so funny, my requests and my kids' requests, because I call my kids my editors, because I would run the book and the illustrations and the songs by them, have my little like test audience in my own home. And so it was so funny because they kind of learned that they could request different things too. And so they were like, Kayla was kind enough to draw my kids into several of the spreads in the book, Aww. Which is so sweet. So they were like, Mommy, can Miss Kayla put us in a hot air balloon, but we would also like to be in there with a sloth and a red fox. And I was like, okay. So there's some of my favorite emails to go back and forth, because Kayla and I have never met in person. So she would send this beautiful spread, and I would be like, oh my goodness, I love the polar bear. Can you make him look a little less fluffy on the bottom? Like, or could you make that lion look a little less hungry when he's roaring with the little girl in that spread? Or Emmylou is on the cover of the first, my little girl is on the cover of the first book. And Kayla originally drew that there was a frog on Emmylou's head. And she goes, "Mommy, I do not want a frog on my head. I would like a flower crown." And so it's just been delightful. It has been like my favorite emails that I've ever sent have been the emails between me and Kayla.
And what a memory too. What a legacy to leave with your kids. Like, you guys created all of this together. And so when you say, don't forget to remember, they're going to see other things that they're not going to forget to remember in their, the formative years of their childhood. They're going to see that in both of these books.
It is. Thank you for saying that. I think that has been the sweetest part of this process is, you obviously write a book and you want to write it for other kids. But for me, I'm like, these are my kids. And so it's been really sweet to see them take ownership in some of these ideas too. And, the day that the book released, that we were supposed to release, Don't Forget to Remember, was literally the day after the tornado hit Nashville. I mean, it went right behind our house. So we actually didn't officially release the book the next day for obvious reasons. First of all, we had no power for like a week after that. But it was such a scary storm. And I ended up on the release day, I ended up with 10 different children in our neighborhood at our house because we had damage to our house, but no shattered glass inside. So there were a couple kids who really couldn't be safely in their own homes. And so I just brought them to my house, and we had balloons and flowers and the book out. And so they all saw the book, and they all call me Lily. And they were like, "Lily, can we read your book today?" And I was like, they were like, "What are all these balloons for?" I was like, "Well, I was supposed to release the book, but we're not going to release it today because we just need to, kind of help our neighbors and show up and kind of pick up the pieces after this storm." And they're like, "Well, can you read it to us?" So we end up reading it, y'all. And there's a line in the book, there's a spread that is after a storm. It talks about, when you see a rainbow after the rain, don't forget to remember God's love stays the same. On glad days and sad days, God's near and he knows he can use any storm to make good things grow. And they were like, "Lily, did you write that about the tornado?" And I was like, "No, but
yes,
he is. He's still here. And do you think you can see anything good already growing?" And so they were like, we can already see good. And they talked about strangers coming to help them pick up the pieces from their house. And they talked about how we were getting to spend time with our friends afterwards on a day when we wouldn't normally get to. And another little girl piped up and she was like, "I've had so many people just hug me and tell me that they love me today." And so we are seeing God bring good things even after that really scary storm. And I do think he was with us. And I am just sobbing. I'm like, yeah. And so to walk around our neighborhood after the tornado, and then in this COVID-19 crisis, it's the season of spring where things look dead, but new life is springing up from dead things. And so it has been so sweet. My kids are like, Mom, look, new life is coming. It's true. God really does make all things new, and he's going to make us new, and we're going to be okay, right? And so I feel like what's happening is my kids are preaching the gospel, not just to themselves, but to me. And so I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for the timing of the release of this book. It's been good, I think, for my kids, but it's definitely been good for my own weary, forgetful heart.
Yeah.
I love what you say about your kids preaching the gospel to you, because, that's so true. That's happened with my own kids. Just what you see reflecting back from them reminds you of God's truth and how they're looking at it through their eyes. And it's so beautiful.
Is that not the best release party ever?
I know. I just was like, this is what this book is for. So it really, I feel that's exactly right. It released on the exact day. God knew, he wasn't surprised by that. And he's not surprised by this crisis this health crisis that we're on. And when you look outside, like, creation isn't worried. it's still, the sun's still coming up every day,
The birds are
reminding
still
us, like,
singing.
the birds are
Yeah.
still singing. Spring is still coming. The flowers are still growing. And I think a lot of days I look outside and I just take a deep breath and say, okay, yeah, it's going to be okay. We don't have to worry. We can tune into this song that creation is singing and remember that God's a good Father who's going to take care of us, even in the midst of this kind of scary and uncertain time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back on the Bible for Kids podcast.
Where is Wisdom? Where is Wisdom takes us on a creative tour through the beautiful truths found in Job 28. I don't know about you, but the book of Job can be a challenging read. Yet Scott James gets to the heart of the poem that Job 28 is. He so simply yet creatively shares the message that the greatest treasure is found in God and in the wisdom that He alone can provide, a truth that everyone needs to hear.
Epic Devotions, 52 Weeks in the Story That Changed the World, is a collection of insightful devotions which explore biblical events in a way that is relevant and exciting. You'll enjoy B&H Kids Book's special feature, Parent Connection, an easy tool to help you engage in meaningful discussions with your family. Available everywhere books are sold.
Mike Naraki, co-creator of VeggieTales, is back. In his hilarious new chapter book series, 10-year-old Michael and his friend Justin sneak into the Dead Sea caves near the archaeological dig where Michael's dad is working. Michael finds a couple of 2,000-year-old squirrels petrified in sea salt. Hijinks ensue as Michael tries to bring them back to the U.S., hidden in his backpack. What Michael thinks are just cool souvenirs may turn out to be something much more. The Dead Sea Squirrels series is humorous, fun, and filled with character-building lessons. As co-creator of VeggieTales, co-founder of Big Idea Entertainment, and the voice of the beloved Larry the Cucumber, Mike Naraki has been dedicated to helping parents pass on biblical values to their kids through storytelling for over 2 decades. To find your own Dead Sea Squirrels, head over to Tyndale.com, Amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore.
We are back on the Bible for Kids podcast, and we're talking with Ellie Holcomb today.
Ellie, you were talking a little bit about your own kids and their inspiration, but can you dive into that a little bit more, how your own kids influence the words and inspiration behind the story?
Absolutely. So when I came up with this idea, don't forget to remember, I was like, I was at a cookout one day with a bunch of families and just people we're doing life with, and they had all their kids there as well. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do some market research and just go around and ask the kids. And so I literally went around at this cookout and just said, okay, tell me the things that are the most important things that you need to remember. And so they went around and they said things like that God is a good Father, that He made us all good. They said things like that God is always with us, and even when we're scared, God is with us, and He's bigger than anything we're scared of. And I was just like, okay, guys, well, you write the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. And then sweet little Jane, who's a dear, dear friend. We actually just did a drive-by parade for her birthday. She lives in our neighborhood. And I said, Jane, what is the most important thing that you need to remember about God? And she said, well, I need to remember that God never forgets me. And I was like, well, thank you for the closing line of my book. I will. That is like, don't forget to remember. So the book ends just saying, and even on days you forget what is true, don't forget to remember God won't forget you. And I love it's so true.
That's awesome.
It's so true, because there are days that we are so forgetful. And I think that's why, He decided, He knew that we might forget. And so He was like, it's cool, guys. I'm going to write it up in the sky every morning with the sun, and every season in the spring, and at night in the stars. I'm going to put the stars in the sky to remind you that light is always stronger than darkness. And I just feel like He knew that we might need some help. And so he wrote His story and His love and His beauty and His kindness into creation.
Yeah. So how do you hope parents and kids, it sounds like maybe more parents, the kids already know all this stuff. So how do you hope they grow from reading Don't Forget to Remember?
I think if anything, I love this idea. I think that as followers of Jesus, our work is to remember. And like I said, I don't know about y'all. I'm a worrier. And I feel like if you are a parent, sometimes just you care so much about your kids, it's really hard to not worry about them. You just, because you love them so much, you don't want anything hard to happen, and yet you know that it will. And so I think my hope is that it really that this book really it will be like. Well, and I wrote songs to go along with it too, so that it's sort of like the truth of who God is, of his faithfulness, would be the song that gets stuck in our head, rather than, I don't know, for me, I never get to the end of the day where I've really been worrying about something and I'm like, I feel so much better because I worried about it. That's never actually how that goes.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And so I think my hope is that this book would put parents and kids on that it would put on repeat the truths of God's faithfulness and his goodness, that those would be the things that we stop looking at the worries, and that we look at creation and at the truth that creation communicates about God's faithfulness, even in the midst of sad and rainy days, even in the midst of storms. And so that it would sort of be like the truth getting stuck in parents and kids' hearts. That's what I need anyway. And so I guess that's my hope for other parents and children.
Well, and that whole idea of repeat is so much a part of the heart of music and writing in verse. And so as a singer-songwriter, writing in verse is something you're well practiced in, and you toured with your husband, Drew, for a number of years. And, you're obviously a Dove Award winning artist. And then you put out Red Sea Road in 2017. So what's the process been like for you as a songwriter to write in verse and then later translate those to music? Or do you, does the melody and the verse come along in your head at the same time? And how does that all work when you're working on the book?
Process work?
Yeah.
I love that question. I can tell that question comes from you, a writer. So I'm like, that is awesome. But I loved, so it was different for me for both books. For the first one, the book came first, and I was doing errands in Nashville. I had written this book that I really loved and was so excited about, and I wanted to write music to go along with it, because I think sometimes for me, this is why I do music, is I sit in God's word. And I started writing music because I was memorizing scripture with a friend of mine who battled depression. And we realized there were so many lies that we believe, and we needed to desperately anchor down in the truth rather than just say, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. We needed something sturdier to stand on. And so the music that I write is all just me sitting in scripture and then letting song come out. And so it's saying God, I believe this, but help my unbelief. And maybe if I can sing this, for whatever reason, the way that I'm wired is if I can sing it, it helps me believe it.
Yeah.
And there's something about that repetition and the connection that song makes from our head to our heart, because we become a part of proclaiming and sort of preaching that good news to our own weary and forgetful hearts. And so I just thought, I knew that I wanted to write music to go along with the book, because songs have helped me so much in my life hang on to the truth. And so I was driving around in my minivan one day. I'd already written the book, and all of a sudden the melody for the book hit me, and I was like, oh! And so I pulled over, because safety first, and got out my little voice and sang it in the car because I didn't want to forget it. So that the song very much came after the book. Well, when I was writing this second book, as I was writing, this melody came to me, and I was like, this almost feels more like writing a song. And so honestly, I used this same melody. That's the melody of the song Don't Forget to Remember, that's the first track of Sing Remembering Songs. That melody came to me, and honestly, it was such a great editing tool, because I just had to, the book can only be so long. It's a 12-page board book, and you don't want so many words on each page.
Yeah,
The pictures do a lot of the talking.
Yeah.
And so I kept singing it, and I would sing. So my first song, my first version of the book was like a 7-minute song. And I was like, that will never do.
First chorus, bridge. That's it.
That's exactly right. So we're going to have to edit some of these illustrations, even though I love all of them so much. We're going to have to edit those down. And actually the song of the second book is actually even edited down. I had to take out 2 of the spreads of the book to make the song just feel the most right.
Yeah.
So, but it was the melody, it really was. It was like a really wonderful editing tool for me. And I loved it because my publisher, my contact at B&H, who really helped me work through the whole process, Michelle, she would be like, Ellie, every time you send me a new update, I'm just singing it. And I was like, I know, me too. So we would be, when we were in the editing process, we'd be like, da, 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 da. Oh yeah, that won't work. We need less syllables in that phrase. So it was a great editing tool.
That's awesome.
The second time around.
I should probably try that going forward, is just to sing all of my books for help with editing. So did you work with your dad again on this one, on the second album?
Yeah, I did, which has been so sweet because 1, he's my dad, and then 2, he's the grandfather of my kids, as it turns out. That's how that works. And the kids.
But I'm going to do the flow chart on that one.
Yeah, the flow chart. Yeah. Do you guys know about family? We just it has been such a joy to work with him over the years. He's been a part of every record that I've ever made personally. And then with any of the records that my husband has ever made, we always sit down with him and have like a pre-production meeting. So he's been a part of all the music that we've made, which has been so sweet. But this has been especially sweet because the kids came in and sang on both of these records, and Pop Pop was behind the console, and so that's what they call him, Pop Pop, because he would always give Emmylou called popsicles Pop Pops. And every time she asked my dad for a popsicle, he gave her one, because that's what grandparents do. And so his name became Pop Pop.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well,
so he has been a sweet thing to have him a part of both these projects. And then the other guy who, the other producer on the 2 kids records is Nathan Duggar. And I wrote a lot of the songs with them. And he's actually my husband's guitar player, but is an incredible songwriter and producer as well. So it's been really fun to kind of bring our musical family and my actual family together.
Well, that's so cool. And my next question for you has to do with family, and we touched on it a little bit because we're all dealing with quarantine now and in this season. And how are you and your family doing with that? I know my wife Lisa and I, we've actually loved getting the chance to spend more time with our kids. We'd recently become full empty nesters, with our youngest going away to college, and then now, bam, we're all back together again. So it's kind of that's been neat for us to kind of enjoy that. But how is school, playtime with them, being away from their friends? I mean, how are you all dealing with all that with your kids?
Yeah, well, congrats on a full home again. That's a really sweet gift. I have been preparing. I've been like sad about my kids leaving before I ever even had a kid. When I was pregnant with Emmylou, I was like 8.5 months pregnant, and we got a wedding invitation in the mail. And I just opened it and started crying. And Drew was like, "What is wrong?" And I was like, "She's going to get married and leave us." And he was like, "She isn't born yet." Like,
and then you
still
crank up butterfly kisses, and then you're
no.
Oh my goodness, it's going too fast. And he was like, "She's not on the outside. You need to calm down. Like, you have lots of time." So I always, and that is like the hardest part of my job. I love what we get to do, but I do have to leave my kids, and it's my least favorite thing. And then my favorite thing about our job is one of my favorite things is when we bring our kids on the road with us. That's a really sweet thing. And we had actually just gotten off the road as a family. We spent the whole month of February, almost every day, I think 24 of the days we were on the road playing shows. My husband and I together, we brought the kids for most of that. Her school's real supportive and gives us her work and lets her keep up. She's just in first grade, so they let her keep up with the work. while she's on a bus, waking up in a different city every day. And I had actually, before all the COVID stuff happened, I'm really grateful we got to do that tour for a variety of reasons, both just for our souls, for our family, financially. Like, it just feels like a gift in a lot of ways. But I had told Drew, our kids were waking up in a different city every day, going to a different children's museum or art museum or science museum. Like, we were getting after some life. And I was like, Drew, our kids need to be bored. Like, they just need some time to be like, like just bored and see what happens with that. And so it has been, I think that has been my favorite part of this. I've loved all being together, even though there are stressful times of that for sure, AKA toddler in the toilet. But
which sounds like a great name for a new book, by the way. Toddler in the toilet.
That'll be the next one. Maybe it'll be a potty training book. But I am so, I'm so grateful for the space, for them to be bored and creative. Like, I looked on the side, we have a little side porch that we turfed, that just the kids can go out on and they can't escape it. So that's good, because they, we can see them. Yeah. And I looked out there and they had a magnifying glass and a bucket of water and some soap suds, and on the fire pit, they had all the fire wasn't going, but they had all their cars. And I loved, and then there was a butterfly net, and I'm just like, they're just making their own fun. Currently connected to my window is a bucket with string on it, and we're passing messages from my window down to the side.
That's so cool.
It's been a really sweet time, I think, for us to have. We're obviously on a more of a schedule than we've ever had, and a rhythm than we've ever had, of doing homeschool in the mornings and then playing and creating. We listen to an audiobook for an hour every day in the afternoons while the baby is napping. And we're sitting down to meals together. We're reading, we're doing a family devotion in the mornings, which we haven't always been able to pull it together to get to school on time before now. And so there have been some serious gifts to this. And then even just a daily walk around the same time every day outside and waving to neighbors as we walk by. So there've been some gifts to this season, even though there are hard things about it. There's for sure a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And on the other side of this, are there plans for new music? Are you getting any writing time? Or is there touring that's going to start again that's been put on hold?
Yeah, so we are, like so many people, we're just trying to pivot, because we've had all of our shows cancel for the last 2 months, and really right now through May, and starting now in June, they're starting to cancel. And so, there is a lot of like uncertainty and unknown with that, but I love, my husband's very creative. He has an entrepreneurial spirit. And so he was just like, okay, he's an 8 on the Enneagram. So he's like, we're going to take this crisis and we're going to roll with it. And so very early on, he said, songs have gotten us through so much. They've brought us joy. They've helped us feel less alone in our sorrow. And he was like, you and I, we're going to sing every night in our kitchen, and we're going to sing other people's songs, and we're going to call it kitchen covers.
I love it. I've been watching and I love it. And I love the little skillet logo and everything.
The skillet logo, the kitchen covers.
So and you sang Home, which I just love.
Did, and I had a salt shaker. I had the Morton salt shaker. But it has been such a joy to do that, and to hear from so many people who are just needing new rhythms and new things to look forward to while they're at home. And so we're actually like recording remotely, safely, like from the context of our own home. And then we have a studio that we went to where they sanitized everything, and just Drew and I went in. So nobody else was there, but in another room was the engineer. And so we have recorded some of those kitchen covers and did a pre-order of vinyl. And all of the proceeds of that are going to just help keep our band and our staff employed during this time. And then we've done a couple online concerts where we just have like a Venmo tip jar for
Venmo tip jar. That's
thing.
Awesome.
I love that.
It has been so beautiful to still have ways of connecting to other people with music. We're doing another concert on May 3rd live from our living room. We switched from the kitchen to the living room for the concert. And we're singing through one of Drew's old records, Good Light. And people tune in and those little hearts start going. And it's amazing how it helps me feel. And I think from the feedback we're getting from other people, feel connected. And so we're working on that. I'm releasing a new single that I wrote on May 8th that I wrote it and I didn't know that we were going to be in this season, but it feels very timely. It's called Constellations. And so that's coming out pretty soon. So we're still creating. It just looks a little different than it did before.
Yeah. So Ellie, where can people find out more information about you, your books, and your music?
Yeah, so ellieholcomb.com. You do Ellie, and then Holcomb's just H-O-L, comb your hair, C-O-M-B. So you can find me there. I'm Ellie Holcomb on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're all the places, Spotify. And so the books, and you can get the books on Amazon too, but I know they're encouraging people to not order not essential things on Amazon. So you can find the books at ellieholcomb.com or lifeway.com.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for taking time to hang out with us today, to fit another thing into your home schedule, which I know is sort of difficult to do right now. And
it's so great to be with y'all and to get to have conversation. It feels like I got to have coffee with friends at my house.
That's awesome.
Yes. And listeners, we are always giving away free stuff on the Bible for Kids. To see how to win a copy of Ellie's latest book, follow us on Facebook or Instagram at The Bible for Kids. And you can also learn more on our website at thebibleforkids.com. So thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of The Bible for Kids.
Thanks for listening to the Bible for Kids podcast with Amy Parker and Mike Naraki. Be sure to connect with the Bible for Kids on Instagram and Facebook and at thebibleforkids.com. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas for future podcasts. You can email us, info@thebibleforkids.com. The Bible for Kids podcast is part of the Way Nation Podcast Network. Find more podcasts at waynation.com.